looks like you guys have been here most of the day. So what I'll do is I'll make this relevant, and when I see your heads nodding, I'll know that's not relevant. Is that not always true? My name is Hba Beaudry, and I work for the Division of Emergency Management. Back in 2005, at the end of the year, then Lieutenant Governor Gary Herbert went and toured Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, right after Hurricane Katrina. He came back and he said, you know, Utah's got a Katrina just waiting to happen, but it's an earthquake, not a hurricane. And that's when, by his directive, the state Department of Public Safety formed the Be Ready Utah program. So you might recognize this red bug up here. In the Be Ready Utah program, we have 4 pillar programs. One that focuses on preparing individuals, one that focuses on preparing communities, one that focuses on preparing schools, and I manage the program that focuses on business and private sector preparedness. So why am I here? Because nobody here works in the private sector, right? But I'm also responsible for a new program in our office called the Utah Public-Private Partnership, where we're following a national trend of preparedness, a whole community preparedness initiative initiated by FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security, to build preparedness down to every grassroots level that we can possibly find, to every individual, every family, every neighborhood, every state, every ward, every business, okay? So one thing I want to set the stage with for you to think about is that your business in the public sector and what you do is only as prepared as your employees. That's one of the biggest takeaways. Think about, as we talk about some of these things, what does your critical operations look like if you only have 50% staffing because after an earthquake you can't find your critical employees, you can't get your people to work, that sort of thing, okay? So there's a lot of value in preparing your employees for this big one. And we have lots of other hazards besides the big one. But that's the one that's probably the most devastatingly impactful. Sure, there's room and contents fires. There's flooding. I saw a presentation from one of your presenters earlier. So whether it's a sprinkler head goes crazy, or a pipe burst, or even our regional seasonal flooding that we get, okay? Maybe it doesn't just impact your building, maybe it impacts the infrastructure that your building relies upon. Electricity, natural gas, wastewater, and those sorts of things, all right? So where I fill in with this is I interface with private sector and public sector and recognize that, as you well know, you've got some frank dependencies on the private sector, namely Rocky Mountain Power and Questar Gas, unless you've got a relationship with a local UAMPS provider like Murray City, Bountiful City, Provo City, and some of the others that generate their own electricity periodically, okay? So you've got that interdependency, and that's what my program is all about. So what I hope to cover today is some bread and butter stuff. You're gonna walk out of this presentation, you're gonna say, Matt, that wasn't very sexy. It didn't really teach me anything I didn't already know. Well, that's the thing. Although we have generational preparedness culture in Utah, we're just not as prepared as we think we are, and we see it over and over again, all right? So that's why the governor still says, hey, we want you to go out and remind people about the bread and butter, the basics of preparedness. So I hope we'll do it justice today. The presentation that's in this book is not the one I'm going to use today. It's most of it, but I added a few slides. So I told Tom I would send him the updated version you're going to see this afternoon, and then he'll forward it out to you, right, Tom? Okay. So this is you. You got a lot to be responsible for, not just the structures, but the infrastructure. And you have a very important role in your organization's continuity of operations. Blurt out for me what you represent, what facilities are represented in this room. Is blurred now. Is it all of them in your jurisdiction? Is it just wastewater, warehouse, road shed? Okay, big one, admin building. If there's a big one and your people need to come into work, they need a place to come into work and everything that comes with it. You need to communicate by phone, by cell, by fax, and by internet. Okay? Who else? Sheriff's Office, corrections, who else? Health Department, huge after large-scale disaster. Who else, guys? The EOC. Yes, critical. What county are you with? Duchesne County. Okay, good. So after a big one, wherever it's at in this state and whatever it means, you guys have got a role in the continuity of operations of your organization. And there's a lot of work that those folks need to do. So let's cover some of the things. You're responsible for all aspects of buildings, I should have said, as well as the land that it's on. You need to be aware of the external hazards. Are you in a floodplain, near a floodplain, near that seasonal runoff that's going to have the 300-year event this year? Probably not this year, okay, but maybe some other year, right? Are you near a fault line? How many know? Are you within 10 miles of a fault line? Every hand in this room should probably go up, right? Just about all of you are. 85% of the state's population and the state's businesses reside within 10 miles of these dozens of, so far, known fault lines. The question we can't foresee, unlike a hurricane, is when, where, how big. We just don't know that. And so rather than become complacent and say, well, it's never happened in my lifetime except for that weird one out in Wells, way back when, that's not okay. We know that we live in a seismically active state. Who can tell me on average how many earthquakes we have in Utah every day? Take a stab.
50.
50, great number. You do your homework. It's about 50.
That's mining, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's not going to fracking. That's Oklahoma's problem, okay? But the good news is most of our earthquakes, and you're right, it's about 50. I've seen it as high as 80. I've seen it as low as 30, so let's split the difference, okay? But they're all small. But that does tell us that we're seismically active. And so the potential is there on any given day. It just needs to have the right combinations of pressure, location, depth, magnitude. Okay. You're responsible for everything that comes into your building that we talked about, the utilities, the ability to communicate, transportation infrastructure, roads, garages, the buildings that you park your vehicles in, the buildings that you house your servers in, the buildings that you do your utilities in. Okay? And they all have a responsibility to be maintained and kept up to date and be safe. Is it power, water? I'm going to talk about a BORP right now. Who knows what a BORP is? Anybody heard of it? Anyone here from Murray? That's all county, right? Sorry.
They have a lot of ports in there.
What's that?
I'm teasing, I'm just saying they have a lot of ports in there.
All right, a BORP. Building Occupancy Resumption Plan. Who's going to come inspect your building and vet it for safety and tenability after an earthquake? Tell me, who is that comes and inspects your building before someone can go back inside? It's a building inspector. It's probably in your county ordinances, okay? San Francisco also has an earthquake hazard. They were the first city in the nation to develop a building occupancy resumption plan, and they recognized that after an earthquake, there's only a finite number of building inspectors, public building inspectors, that can come and inspect a building after an earthquake. That means there's going to be long lines and long waits for you to have a public building inspector get to your building, inspect it, vet it, prove it's safe. No one wants to wait that long. You cannot wait that long. So what we do with the idea of a BORP, and so far there's 2 cities in Utah that have adopted the occupancy resumption program. Salt Lake was the first, Murray was the second. This is a seed I'd like to plant with you folks and have you take it back to your administrators and talk about getting a BORP on your county ordinances, because that's what it'll require. In simplicity, and I'll kind of flip through these slides really quick, these were developed by the then president of the Utah Structural Engineers Association, a guy named Brent Maxfield. Brent works for the LDS Church. He's a structural engineer, okay? But he was also the president of the USEA at the time this was developed. And the idea is that you would hire a private building inspector, a structural engineer, an agreed upon expert with your building department. How do I get this full screen, or is it already full screen? Oh, here we go. I got it. Okay. Hire a professional structural engineer in accordance and agreement with your building department to come and pre-inspect your building while you've got the luxury of time. Then after the big one, instead of waiting in line for the finite number of inspectors, you've already got your pre-inspect on file with the building department. Bring back that same inspector, that same private engineer, that same firm, okay? And have them post-inspect your building after the incident. Green tag it if they can, hopefully. Red tag it, hopefully not. But conduct the inspection instead of waiting potentially days, okay, to get an inspector out to your facilities. Because by law, you're not allowed to have people go back into it until it's deemed safe. Am I right? Am I right, or do you know?
What would be a major earthquake? What would qualify for that? If we have 50 of them a day, you can't have it. 50.
Well, no, I understand that, but I think you're gonna recognize when your building's been shook pretty hard.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're gonna know.
Well, yeah, in our building, we had that happen. We were in a major place of an earthquake down in Henry County. But, source of it, our building didn't settle until a couple of years after.
Okay.
So, and now we've got cracks in it.
Yeah, I suppose there's lots of unforeseen possibilities. I'm talking about the obvious untenable or structural concern of your buildings. And you'll know when there is one. You'll see cracks, or things will have fallen over, or they'll be listing. You know, they're not plumb and they're not right, and you'll know. In that moment, bring in that same person in Andy for a post-inspect and have it filed with the building department. If you're green tagged, you're ready to go instead of waiting in line. And there's the value of the board. If you want more information on that, I can send it to you and I can put you in touch with the guy that wrote this program, okay? Because it's going to save you a ton of time. Any questions about the board? Okay, I can put you in touch with those guys, like I said. There we go. Sorry, Tom, got to do it my way. Okay, there we go. All right, so the board, we've talked about critical environments, server rooms with racks and racks and racks of sensitive computer equipment. They need air conditioning, they'll need water to run those air conditioners and the chilling units. So when we talk about critical environments, that's what we're talking about. Rooms that have to stay cold and rooms that have to stay the right temperature. How about securing fall hazards? So you may have some of this stuff in your buildings. I didn't put up pictures of forklift racks and racking systems, but you get the idea. This is the easiest fix you have in all of your buildings right now, is how to secure fall hazards that can hurt or kill people if they fall over or fall off, or damage or ruin expensive equipment, okay, or even damage your facilities. So this is another easy fix for you to go back and secure this stuff, so because we don't know when it's going to happen and when this stuff is going to fall over. And these are just some minor ones. I mean, everyone's home has got this strap around your hot water tank, and I'm sure your buildings do too. And I'm sure most of your buildings have some version of filing cabinets and these expensive pieces of equipment. So you want to think about securing those so that it doesn't become costly or damage a person or cost them their life. Your role after the big one are what I put up here, and probably a lot more that you know better than I do. Some of the stuff that's in your buildings requires a systematic sequence to safely shut things down, to properly shut it down. Think about boilers, think about computer equipment, and sensitive pieces of equipment like that. So you have a responsibility, you or your staff, to get people out of the building for safety's sake, if that's the case. Turn all this stuff off. Make sure that we didn't leave the gas on, and then it finds an ignition source, and then we have another disaster on top of the one we're trying to deal with. So avoid second disasters by turning off utilities appropriately. What about all your backup systems? Backup generators. How often do you test the fuel? Is it often enough? Your emergency lighting systems. And we'll talk about emergency communication systems in a minute. Okay. So I'm going to get into another part of this PowerPoint in a minute. I'm going to talk about you are subject matter experts in your team where you work. You're specialists in what you know, what you're responsible for, and what you do. Just like the business office manager is, just like the commissioners are, just like the IT manager is. You've got lots and lots of specialists, and as facility managers and people responsible for the facilities, you're one of those managers. We recommend that all businesses, and you're a business, that your business bring together a team of experts and conduct hazard and vulnerability assessments for all of your facilities. Talk about that in a minute. Also conduct business impact analysis. That's a BIA. I'll show you that in a minute as well. These are two simple tools that you look at to analyze what are the likely hazards to our facilities, what are our vulnerabilities to those hazards, and I'll even show you a worksheet you can use, a simple template to kind of add up the numbers and start ranking your hazards and your vulnerabilities to those hazards, and also recognizing what are the impacts of our vulnerabilities. What could the impacts be on our people, on our facilities, on our equipment, on our supply chain? Okay. How many are in the room are responsible for fuel as well? Anybody here responsible for fuel management for your fleet? Nobody? Okay. All right. Will you want to consider identifying alternate facilities to do business out of in the event that your buildings are untenable? That's smart planning. You have the luxury, at least we think we have the luxury of time right now. You want to hire a realtor to go out and find the specifications you're looking for in the geographic areas that you're looking for? Or do you already have your eyes on those short list of buildings that might fill the bill when the buildings you're in can't be used? So think about alternate facilities. Do we only need them for a short time, forever? Do we want to just plan on staying there until we build a new one? Do we only need a certain number of buildings, or should we start looking at all of our buildings? Would you consider doing business with someone else, co-locating in their facility if it was still tenable? So I put competitor. You guys don't really have competitors. This is more geared towards private sector, right? But we see private sector companies doing that all the time. They recognize that they have hazards that they're vulnerable to, and in the rare event that they might not be able to get back into their buildings where they do business, would they consider pairing up with a competitor so that it's a win-win? Yeah, I've got some companies that end up doing that, actually. On this topic right here, how redundant do you need to be in the resources that you're responsible for? So an easy topic to talk about on this one is electrical power. So backup generators, that's an easy fix. One of the takeaways, my first takeaway I gave you was your business is only as prepared as your employees are. Here's another takeaway I'm going to give you. Eliminate single points of failure. So when you conduct your hazard and vulnerability assessments, go around and look at what you're responsible for. And hey, you can give other areas ideas as you see them, where you need to eliminate single points of failure. So here's a simple one that you might resonate with. How many of you, and I'm going to pick on you because you're right here, are the guy in your organization that has these and nobody else has them? How many? That's only just 2 or 3? Typically a lot more than that. What happens if we can't find this guy after the big one? You just got outed. Sorry. You're busted. So you see my point. That's a great example of a single point of failure. In most organizations, there's that one essential person that's got all the keys. They know where all the secret spaces and special switches are, how to hold your mouth just right to get that blower to fire up, right? Things like that. That's a single point of failure. And you need to look at eliminating those in the event that after the big one, that critical resource cannot be accessed, cannot be used. Okay. Another thing I think is a huge takeaway is get to know your local responders. And if you've drilled with the fire department, great. If you haven't, go find them and drill with them. What about the police department? Why in the world would you need the police department to come into your building and get familiar with it? Because more and more people are coming back to work with guns, shooting up fellow employees or their former boss. So the need for familiarity with your first responders, with the layout of your building, your safe spaces, time and space save lives when it comes to a workplace violence incident with a gun, the active shooter problem. And it's not just happening somewhere else. Okay? It's happening everywhere, every day. And it could happen at your place. A disgruntled employee that was let go, not happy with the situation. Lots of things I could think of that can cause that problem. And it's a hazard that everybody in this room should be thinking about. So the value in getting to know your first responders, and more importantly, them coming to your sites and getting to understand them, because they're going to be the first ones to show up. Where's the FDC? Where's the hydrant? Okay, where's the alarm box? And for the cops, it's Where are all your spaces? Where do we come in? Where's your command post? Where are your rally points for your employees? They want to know your plan because it's their safety just as much as yours. So please get to know your local responders. Now, this thing I'll say a whole bunch. How many have plans and know they have plans? Okay, just about everybody. So by show of hands, how many have looked at your plans in the last 6 months? Wow, good. Good for you. Okay? I don't usually get that kind of response. Knowing your plan is great. Testing your plan is just as essential. I really preach exercise, not Gold's Gym exercise, but exercising your plan. Because it's great to know what we did good, what we thought out well. It's more important to find the gaps. Because lives can be in the balance, a lot of money can be in the balance, and the continuity of the critical role that your company, your county, plays in serving the community could be at stake. So test your plans, find your vulnerabilities. All right, so here's where we're going to get into the presentation I usually give. So you're going to forgive me, but for the sake of you sitting down all day, I'm going to kind of flip through a lot of this pretty quick. If you've got questions, please blurt them out. If you've got something to say, please let me know. I understand it's been a long day, and like good students, no one's going to say anything. I get that. So, I'll make it quick, but we'll make it relevant. So on this page, you see photographs depicting hazards that all your businesses are vulnerable to. Yeah, even the tornado. We just had the 15-year anniversary of the Salt Lake City tornado last year, right? So whether it's a natural disaster or a man-made disaster, like the active shooter we were talking about. And what about this disaster? Does it impact you as facilities managers? Darn right it does. It's a tidal wave. It's a tidal wave that the whole country is trying to wrap their head around. I was just listening to the radio on the way down here. How many heard about the hack 2 weeks ago of Anthem Insurance, the umbrella company that manages all the Blue Cross and Blue Shield insurance plans around the country? They were hacked. They originally thought it was 80 million files. Today, they just released information that could be closer to 100 million files. Okay. The Target data breach. Remember 2 years ago almost now, a year and a half ago, right after Christmas, Target announced that right after the Christmas shopping season, they've been hacked for 20 million files. Okay. Anyone want to guess how they got into Target's database? Through a remote controlled HVAC system. And that's how they found their way in. In this interconnected digital world, these people are pretty darn creative. And they've been forensically looking at the Target breach ever since it occurred, and just recently announced to us in a DHS data call that they discerned that they got into an HVAC system that was remotely controlled. Okay. You have something like that in your facilities? Something to think about. I'm sure your IT department is all over it. Not. It's impossible to keep up with. It's like the machine gun fire a couple years ago. Off to the races, 50-mile-an-hour winds, and we don't possibly have enough resources to keep up with this cybersecurity problem. We're chasing and chasing and chasing it. So if you're interested, I've got some experts that I bring to companies that talk about cybersecurity. Things like social engineering. Anyone know what social engineering means? It means teach your people that don't open emails and attachments, they don't know what they are. That's social engineering. It's teaching people how to be smarter about how they use computers and the technology. So they talk about social engineering, they talk about systems hardening, lots of things. If you're interested in that, let me know. It's a killer presentation and can make a big difference in the continuity of your facilities just from that perspective. So what we see here is all the hazards that we're faced with in Utah. Not all these pictures came out of Utah, by the way, but those are the real ones for us, natural and man-made. This is ours. Okay. So I don't know if you live in this area, or if you work down in Utah County, or up in Davis and Weber counties. Those red lines are the fault lines, and they're everywhere. They're up in the mountains, too. They're down by St. George as well. Our state is fraught with these fault lines. The pink shaded areas are different severities of liquefaction. Liquefaction is water content in the ground that rises under pressure with the plates doing this, like an accordion and moving water to the least point of resistance, and that's the surface. And it will have an effect on your foundations, on your pillars, okay, on everything you think is secure. The thing we don't know is how severe will that impact be. So that's why we preach and preach and preach incessantly mitigation. Retro update your buildings if you've got the money. Identify the ones you should. You know, we started with schools. That was an easy one to pick. Schools need to be retrofitted for earthquake standards, okay? But where do you start? Because this isn't the only area that's got fault line and liquefaction issues. But those are the big hazards that we're faced with, and a lot of vulnerability that goes along with it. So quickly, what's in it for us? Now, this is not you necessarily as the public sector, but statistically, we know from looking at Katrina and Superstorm Sandy and the seasonal tornadoes that are getting more and more devastating, that 1 out of every 4 businesses, and let's just say facilities, doesn't reopen owing to a lack of preparation. Now, that's nobody's fault. That's just a good reality. We have a good mindfulness now that, and Utah's a good example of the real problem. And we've seen it over the past, 5, 6, and even longer years. More and more people are streaming into this beautiful place. So we're densifying our residential populations, we're densifying our business populations, we've got more buildings going up. Many of you, like me, probably drive around and say, who ever thought they should build there? Yeah? Well, all the good land's already been picked. So now we're going to the 2nd and 3rd and 4th best places. And those come with hazards and vulnerabilities. But the thing is 1 out of 4 facilities will close after a big disaster. And of those that make it, half of those over the next 2 years, limp along, might go out of business as well. Again, that's not you, but it emphasizes the problem that we face. Here's a quick continuum of the problem. And what it points out really well is we can take steps ahead of time, that's called mitigation, to make this shallower and make it shorter. And that's what we want to talk about today. That's what I want you to go back as the subject matter expert on facilities and start talking to your team about, okay? How can we take steps now to shorten that depth of that chasm and shorten the length of that chasm and get back to normal operations as quickly as possible? Hopefully you got a better plan than that right there, okay? But a lot of people don't. But it's a good place to figure that out and start somewhere. So we'll get through this part really quick. Make a team. It should be all the experts in your organization. You're the expert on facilities. Pull your team together. Make sure it also includes maybe people that are on retainer or are temporary contractual experts, consultants, and that sort of thing. You have to consider any legal or regulatory issues when it comes to building your plan. So you've got a lot to think about, and the whole team will help think about it. Think about everything. This is where we get into the HBA. Identify the hazards, identify your vulnerability to the hazards. Natural hazards, man-made hazards. How do you know your vulnerability? Well, some of you have been there long enough, you've got a history. You know that you're maybe close to a floodplain. You know that you might be in proximity to a fault line. Or next to that big building that's probably going to come down when the ground stops shaking or before, and it's going to fall on your building. All right, so those are all the kinds of hazards we're asking you to look at. That'd be a great example of a cascade effect. Your building is unimpacted, but your neighbor's building fell on yours, and now it's impacted. Cascading. What assets in your facilities are at risk? People, number one, equipment, and other things that you store, supplies, that sort of thing. So what would the impact of these hazards that you've identified and your vulnerability to these hazards, what would that impact be on those assets? Well, you can always hire more people, right? They hired you one day. I'm just kidding. So you see my point. We want to look at the things that are true assets to the organization and start looking at how can we blunt the real sharp edge of the hazards. That's mitigation. Now the other thing is things change with time. Maybe you've got more facilities than you did when you originally conducted your first HBA and BIA. Maybe you've added on to the building. You've got more employees. You've got more stored in those buildings in terms of inventory. You've got more vehicles stored in the barns. I don't know what you do. So the point is, every periodically reassess the HBA because things change with time. So here's the idea of the business impact analysis. And the overarching message, which I already shared with you, is eliminate single points of failure. Identify your hazards, identify your vulnerabilities, look at the risks, the assets that are at risk according to your hazards and vulnerabilities. What would the impacts be? I mean, you're not going to lose customers, you're locked up that way. But in the private sector, they are worried about losing customers to their competitors, losing reputation because they can't fill orders, all right? So take a global look at what would the impacts be based on the HVA that you've done. When you marry up the findings of an HVA and a BIA, you start to get numbers that rise above other numbers because it's just a mathematical equation. And they'll start to identify the priorities themselves. The higher the number, probably the higher the priority for you to mitigate, because you've ranked impact on people, property, your inventory, and even your supply chain for that matter. Okay? Questions about an HVA and a BIA? All right. I already touched on this one, the guy with the keys, but more importantly, the decision makers. Build bench depth in all of your critical operations. If you're the only one in your organization that's empowered and knowledgeable to make these critical decisions after the incident, then you need to coach up some subordinates, some replacements, in case you can't be there, in case they can't find you, the number one guy, but they can find your backup, okay? So build some bench depth. We like the 3B principle, and they need to know what they're empowered to do, and how to do it, and when to do it, and what to do it with. And that is not going to happen overnight. But see, right now we have the luxury of time. And that's simple continuity planning right there, eliminating the single point of failure. Then determine what are your essential functions. Blurt them out for me. I mean, the must-haves. You can get by without doing a lot of stuff. But what are some of the things that you've got to do? Just tell me.
Pay taxes.
Well, that one might slide for a couple of weeks, okay, while we get back to normal. But in your role as facilities managers or the facilities that you manage, what are the critical functions that your county business must have intact or quickly bring back up to speed to keep doing the critical job that they're supposed to do? Power, water, sewer. Yeah, everybody thinks about water and it's water out of the tap. The way more important one is the water that goes down the bowl. Because if you can't do that, we've got a much bigger problem. And you guys get that really well. Most people don't get that. So identify what your essential functions are, the ones that you have a responsibility for. And what are you going to do? How long can you not do business? Well, not very long. You're the county. The county's got a critical role in restoration of services and recovery of the whole community and everything that the county provides the community. And you've got a key role in that. Comment? No? Okay. You guys don't worry too much about this stuff, okay? But there's people on your team that will. And that's why I'd be happy to come out and talk to your management team about this that I'm showing you. So this might be the takeaway I ask you to take back to the home office and say, hey, this guy can spend an hour with us and kind of coach us up on some things we should think about. That's about how long it takes, 45 minutes to an hour, okay? Unless we get chatty, which is a good idea. So again, big takeaway. After identifying the critical ones, people, equipment, services like the internet connectivity, the ability to answer the phone, the ability to make phone calls, that's a big part of what the county's going to do after the big one. And you're going to have some role in making sure there's some contingencies there. So eliminate single points of failure, have backup plans. You know, there's a great story. St. Mark's Hospital in Salt Lake City, they make phone calls by the thousands every day. Families want to talk to loved ones that are in the hospital. Surgeons need to consult with other physicians, that sort of thing. Inexplicably, one afternoon, their phone system just went dead, gone. No dial tone, no nothing. Fortunately, their continuity planner had foreseen that possibility as a hazard, as a vulnerability, as a single point of failure. So they went to their CEO and they said, you know, just in case our phone system dies, because it's happened, not to us, but others, how about we pay a subscription fee for a backup phone plan? And it was a multiple platform phone plan. It was voice over protocol, it was, you know, a bunch of things, satellite connected, had a lot of redundancy in it. And I forget the subscription, but it didn't really kick into a higher fee until they actually activated it. Well, that moment came. Loved ones still need to hear from their families. Surgeons still needed to consult over the phone. They went into their control center and they flipped a switch, and guess what? They had phone service again. The guy's comment when he told the story, we would have paid 10 times over and it would have been well worth it. It meant so much to the continuity of our operations. So when we look at single points of failure, is communications one? Yes, for sure. Because we know from studying disaster, and I get my geek on studying disasters because that's my passion. We know from studying Katrina and Sandy and others around the world, okay, the first two things that swirl the drain are the ability to communicate and the ability to move, transportation. And since our biggest hazard is an earthquake, that can never be more amplified. We don't know how surface roads and overpasses and bridges, big or small, are going to be impacted. And so the ability to communicate is a big hazard. Build redundancy in your ability to communicate. Transportation, it's kind of up to you, Doc, but it's also kind of up to your county folks that are responsible for roads. I don't know about you, but here's an easy contingency plan. Go back and tomorrow when you talk to all the people you work with, plant this seed. When you come back to work on Monday, let's talk about the 3 alternative ways you get to work when your primary way isn't passable. Simple contingency plan. Okay. Have redundancy in just the ability to get to work. Yeah, it might take you twice as long. It's probably only a good excuse after the emergency, not every day and showing up late to work, okay? But anyway, easy stuff to start taking care of. Now this one doesn't affect you so much, but maybe it does. Who do you need to communicate with? Well, who are your audiences? A lot of people are going on no after the ground stops shaking. How you guys doing? Doing all right? All right? So identify your audiences and what are they going to want to know, and have answers already pre-scripted. This is really more relevant to the private sector because they rely on keeping their customers happy. But maybe this applies to you because you do have a supply chain. Who are the suppliers and the service providers that you rely on? And how prepared are they? So here's another simple redundancy. Maybe you identify a second and a third provider. Maybe you've done business with that same company that provides you those essential chemicals or widgets or whatever. And some of those suppliers, you don't have any redundancy. There's no answer for when Rocky Mountain Power goes down, really. There's no answer for when Questar goes down, really. And they're aware of that. They're regulated industry, and they're required to have some contingencies to get back up really quick. And I've talked with them a lot, and they know as quick as they can. But talk to your suppliers. How vulnerable are they? Likely, they're in the same geographic area that's going to be impacted that you're in. Because that's how we do business with locals, right? At least you're encouraged to. Maybe you should consider brokering an agreement with someone outside the impacted area or the possible impacted area as a contingency, but you get to decide, okay? Should you consider contingencies in terms of hardware, like a satellite phone? Probably a lot of you use radios, I'm guessing. We know that the cell towers are going to go down. There was an earthquake, 2 years ago in Virginia, right outside Washington, D.C., and it shook the ground. I think it was like a 4 something, as I recall. Didn't kill anybody, didn't break anything. It put a crack in the Washington Monument, and they spent 2 years repairing the Washington Monument. That was as bad as it got. But because everybody was on the cell phone, you okay? I'm okay. Kids okay? Yeah, check the school. Yeah, the building's still up. We're still filling orders. Cell system was down for 6 hours because it was overwhelmed with the volume of cell phone traffic. So here's another takeaway. If you haven't written it into your plan, one of the best contingencies for dealing with the inevitable failure of the cell system, text instead of voice. Much less of a burden, much more likely that your messaging is going to get through. All right, so here's one you're really going to like, because most of you are my age or older, and some of you aren't. So what I'm going to show you here, just to show you the power of social media. How many use social media? Twitter, Facebook, and such. There was an earthquake off the coast of Japan just about 4 years ago, March 2011. Caused a huge tsunami. We all saw it, watched it. It was amazing. What you're going to see here is you're going to see Twitter traffic emanating out of this area that was affected because phone lines were down. There was no internet, but for some weird reason they could still tweet. Okay? Go figure. It's a contingent method of communicating. So here you had family members tweeting family members in the same continent, in the same hemisphere, and beyond, around the world, I'm okay, we're okay. Then you saw businesses tweeting saying, the office is collapsed and on fire, I can't find half the employees, or we're all okay, I've accounted for all the employees, and blah, 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 whatever the message was. The pink lines are going to be the outbound messages. Look at the volume and the scale of the green lines that are the retweets. I don't know how to get this thing going, buddy. Here, let's try this. Here we go. Pink is original message, green is retweeted message. I like showing this because it really shows the reach of social media, and in this case it's Twitter. In the emergency management industry, we recognize that Twitter is a great tool for providing real-time information, real ground truth. People that are right there in the thrash, tweeting pictures, and tweeting videos, and tweeting information and updates. We have a seat in our state DOC that does nothing but have 2 people monitor social media. Twitter, Facebook, and others, Instagram, okay? And we watch the trends from all the eyes out there seeing it as it happens. Not trying to catch the cops because they're busy, not trying to find the firefighters, they're busy, okay? So is there value in you integrating more social media? Maybe not for you as facilities managers, but for your organization as a whole. And I'll bet your public affairs or public information officer is pretty dialed into this idea. When you have your planning team get together, talk about how do we use social media as a team to communicate if our cell phones don't work, if our landlines don't work, if we can't email, but maybe we can tweet. Have you pre-identified a hashtag? That's how we make channels, as it were. You want a channel for Davis County Sheriff's Office? They already have one. You want a channel for Duchesne County Public Works? Make one. It's hashtag whatever you make it. That's how you make the channel. And then you already know, because you've identified it in your plan, this would be one contingency way we can communicate when all others that we normally use fail. Simple contingency plan. Okay? That's all we're talking about here. Any questions about that? Kind of impressive. You want to see it again? No, I'm going to get you out of here. All right, more information on the same idea. Identify your critical supply needs. What are they? You guys, some things you must have. Do you all work in a real-time, just-in-time inventory method? Most companies do. We got away from stockpiling lots of stuff because just there's money sitting on the shelf. But I don't know how you do it in your scope of operations, but most do. So the question you have to ask yourself is, if our suppliers can't get us our stuff like they do every Tuesday morning, or whatever the schedule is, what should we stock up on just in case? Well, I don't know, but you do. And a team of experts in your organization should. And if you don't, then you got to talk about it. And consider what's the value of investing a little extra money to stockpile some of those essential things we've got to have. If you set up contingencies, and you might want to, again, geographically dispersed outside the likely affected area. You're probably doing business with a lot of Utah companies that are all in the same vulnerable place along the Wasatch Front. Fault lines, liquefaction, disrupted roads, and their employees can't make it into work either, so there's no one there. Maybe you should find alternate suppliers. And of course, the question is, how soon can they get in from Ohio? Well, one thing we do know is that South Regional Airport is built on big old rock. It's going to be one of the 2 airports within about a 50-mile radius that's going to be functional. I promise it's going to be pretty busy, okay? But maybe it's not too busy that it can't get in your supplies because you've made that agreement because it was that essential to you. I don't know, but you do. This is more for business, but vital records. And what vital records do you maintain? Do you maintain any vital records? Blueprints? Floor plans? I don't know. Schematics? Stuff that if the building burned up, where's the copy? Is it stored in the cloud? Is it in a safety deposit box? Is it 100 miles away? Is it under your bed at home? I mean, I don't know. But consider making duplicates of those critical records that are impossible to recreate and put them in many places where, and eliminate the single point of failure. All right, so finishing up here, what do you know about the capabilities inside? Because this is where mitigation can start to happen. You have folks that are knowledgeable in certain essential skills. And I'm not just talking about first aid and saving lives, although that should be your #1 priority in your plan. But also about the essential things that you need to know. What are the capabilities within your organization? What about the capabilities outside? Another pitch for getting to know your first responders. Invite them into your buildings. How many of you have in your plan or your directory the local community and customer manager for Rocky Mountain Power? One thin hand. Two, thank you, sir. Sorry, I overlooked you. Okay? When the power goes out and you need to know how soon it's going to be back on, that's the person you want to get in touch with, not their toll-free number that everybody else is calling at the same time. Every region in Utah has a community and customer, or customer and community, one or the other manager, and they serve your area. If you don't know who they are, email me. Tom's got my email. I'll contact Rocky Mountain Power and have them find you. Okay? Because that's someone you want to be able to get in touch with at 3 o'clock in the morning when all of a sudden the gas quit working or the electricity got turned off. Okay? Is that local point of contact to get utility restoration going. All right, so we talked about fire drills and the active shooter drill. How many have had an active shooter drill in the past 12 months? Past 6 months? Past 2 years? Okay.
We have a video we have of employees, mandatory employees watch.
Okay, and that's a good start, and I'm going to pick on it. So forgive me, I'm going to pick on it. So, can you teach me how to hit a curveball by watching a video? You could teach me a little bit. Yeah, you could start. But nothing beats muscle memory. You got to physically walk out of the building, walk to the rally points, practice getting out, practice communicating. Who's in charge of the administrative building? Who was that that put their hand up and said, I'm in charge of the county administrative building? Is it 1 floor or 2? So how does the second floor where the shooters communicate to the first floor that there's a shooter?
I just started this year.
Good answer.
We're actually planning on doing this.
But what did I say? Whether it's Hurricane Katrina or a shooter on the second floor, the first thing to fail in a disaster is the ability to communicate. And in this case, we can watch a video, and I'm not bagging on it. Great thing, great start. But muscle memory is how you learn how to hit that curveball. You take enough pitches, pretty soon you start hitting. You drill enough, you walk out of the building, you go to the rally point, you're on the radios, you're taking accountability. It's muscle memory. And that'll matter when you need it.
It's not much different than running the evacuation drill. You run those all the time.
Then have your police department come in and pretend to be the bad guy. And how many will they catch before you've all got out safe? It'll turn into a fun game and it'll make a point.
Our police department's doing that with the elementary schools and junior high.
Excellent.
High school.
Excellent. And that's what we need to do. So again, another plug for inviting your cops and your firefighters to come in.
We did have farming.
Did you get Ellis Brew while you were at it? Oh, good. He's a friend of mine. He deserves it. All right, so I think I made my point on that one because there's a lot of conversation about it, and that's good. Another simple idea, are any of your facilities next to a roadway that moves hazardous materials, or next to a rail line that moves hazardous materials? Or are you next to a building that's loaded up with hazardous materials? So instead of evacuating, is sheltering in place one of your options, or should it be? And if it is, do you have the right materials? Not only visqueen and duct tape to seal off the room, but do you have that Stanley tote that's got water and food and a radio and flashlights? And what if you're going to stay there for 12 hours and it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon? And you're not going to get cleared out of there just before the sun comes up. Does anyone need their cardiac medications, their insulin? Okay, stuff like that. Now, I get that these are wild, maybe never happen scenarios, but that's what contingency and continuity planning is looking at what could happen, what's the likelihood it could happen, and let's start trying to deal with that. This is one that might resonate with you. Is the check going to cover it? And can we cover the deductible? That's probably not your concern, but is there the right things in place that we can get our building taken care of, get back to normal as quickly as possible? So that's something that your business people are going to have to think about. So you might want to plant that seed. Hey, when was the last time we looked at our insurance policies, or are we self-insured? A lot of counties are, okay? But that's a question that businesses ask all the time. When was the last time we checked with our insurance agent And will the check cover it? How much have we grown since we wrote that policy? Do we have more buildings, more equipment, more value that we need to have covered? Okay, so insurance review is pretty important. We've already talked about this one. I can hook you up with some great experts if you're interested on that, okay? If you think you've got some good plans in place that back up your data and protect it, test it. I've given a lot of these presentations. And I'll never forget the one afternoon I had a guy, he was sitting in the back row and he said, hey, we bought a software and it was a backup plan for our business office, and every day when I'd go home at night, locking things up, turning off the lights, I'd see that program booting up on the screen in the front office. And then we found out one day when we needed it that that's all it was doing. It was just showing a thing on the screen. It wasn't backing up anything. So if you think you've got a plan for backing up data, test it. If you think you've got stuff in place to protect your systems against hacktivists and phishers and whatever else are trying to get into your data, and county data is attractive. It's got lots of secrets and lots of valuable information that they can convert into money for them. Okay? So if you've got these systems, tell your IT folks, hey, we need to test that. Let's run a drill. Let's go on our backup plan, whatever. Okay. Same with your data protection and your ability to recover it. And here we're going to end up, so I'll finish up really quick. As I said, your company's only as prepared as your employees are. And what is your company willing to do to prepare your employees? Okay. So when I came to work, they took my picture, they put it on a card, I got credentials, they gave me a 72-hour kit to keep under my desk just in case. And that was their investment in my preparedness. Does anybody here at your company's hold employee safety fairs, preparedness fairs? Yeah, a few hands go up. Try to hold those regularly and make them fun, because it's not a very sexy topic, I get it. We just don't have a hurricane season where we see the real value in preparedness. It's a concept that happens somewhere else. We haven't been there, suffered that, like the Gulf Coast and the East Coast. So all I can do is talk about it. But when that day comes that you're going to be the ones that have been there, suffered that, then we really get the value of preparation. So what would you be willing to do in your company? Simple preparedness measures, like during flu season, put an emphasis on sanitizing often touched surfaces, door handles, desktops, countertops, steering wheels. What about putting more hand sanitizer around the workplace during flu season? What about flyers above the urinals that remind guys, hey, wash your hands? And in the stalls that remind women, hey, wash your hands, it's flu season. Okay? Stuff like that. So some of this preparedness stuff doesn't require any money. Requires a little bit of time with some copies printed off, and that's about it. Maybe some hand sanitizer. You have a cache of workplace emergency supplies, the essentials. Seasonal essentials like stuff to stay warm, food, water, and maybe peel the layer on that once and consider, should we have some emergency medications? Well, that's a personal thing. So spread that word to your employees. Hey, can you bring additional stuff for you? Keep it in your desk. So you have some opportunities to get involved right away. We have the Great Utah Shakeout coming up on April 15th at 10:15 in the morning. Okay? And so that's an easy one to get involved in. Do you know how many, by show of hands, know if your county's registered for Shakeout? 1, 2, 3, maybe. Go back, plant a seed, and someone take the initiative and register your county. Right now we've got almost 600,000 people statewide registered for Shakeout. And it can be as simple as drop, cover, hold on underneath your desk. You got to come out sometime. You can't stay there all day. Okay? Oh, darn. Or maybe a little more involved, like a simple, hey, let's sit around the table and talk about what if and what would we do. Or maybe a functional where we pull out the emergency equipment, turn on the emergency lights, run that backup data system. Anything and everything, it's up to you. There's no hard and fast rules for participating in Shakeout. Please just participate. Take swings. Learn how to hit the curveball. And Shakeout is an opportunity to get in the batter's box and take some swings. You'll find some things out that'll help you realize, hey, we're a little more vulnerable in certain areas than we thought. All right, so there's some other ideas up there, and we've got some other ideas on our Be Ready Utah site. So I'm going to skip all these. There's our webpage for Be Ready Business. But there's our URL, bereadyutah.gov. And these are the 4 pillar programs right here for family, business, school, community. We've plagiarized the best, and we want you to plagiarize it too. There's all kinds of stuff you can download, print off, games, templates, all kinds of resources. Just spend a couple days in there off and on looking around. You're going to find something that's valuable. And on that, that's all I've got, unless there's any questions. And I know it's 3:30 and being here all day, so probably not. Tom has my email. If you'd like any of this information or anything I can help you with, I'd really like to come out and talk to your team and talk to your directors about the value of continuity planning. Because government is all about making sure we serve the community, but how prepared are we to take care of ourselves? Okay, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.